A couple had a challenge as they named a child. They had already had several children. This is one of those couples that have a lot of kids, and they had another one. And they already had a son named Jacob. And they liked the name Jacob. However, they knew that if they had a son, they knew they were going to have a son, they could not name this one that was coming along Esau. He said that one was just out of the question. I mean, you're just inviting a child to have issues. A boy like this, my brother Jacob, and I'm Esau. It's just inviting him to have issues. And even the writer said, in sharing this story, he said, really, have you met anybody named Esau? Lately, at least. It's just because of the history of that name. So that was out of the question. Well, again, so Jacob is out. Well, we like the name Joseph. But we have a daughter named Mary. And this is a pastor and his wife, and said, that's just too much to have it. It's Mary and Joseph, our children. So that one was out of the line. What about Peter? Now that was good because he said that was the name of my grandfather and my brother and others in the family. Well, we have the daughter named Mary, and we already have a son named Paul. And that would mean here's our children, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Some of you all got that. And some of you, I'll explain to you after the service, okay, if you're curious. I don't know in his story what name they finally selected for the fellow, and maybe that was to protect his anonymity because they had several after that one. But nevertheless, it was a funny way of saying that names do matter. And that was the point he was making in that presentation, that names do matter. Some of you may have studied Romeo and Juliet in high school, a play by Shakespeare, and one of their points was, what's in the name? Well, if your last name is Montague or Capulet, there is a lot to it. And those two found out a hard way. There is the name and how we are called by that name. In Virginia, I had a church member, and her name was Tara, and I had to be very careful not to call her Peanut. Because in high school, there was a classmate, her name was Tara, and we within our class called her Peanut. Now, she was called Tara by teachers. It wasn't one of those, nobody knows my real name. It was just, a group. Again, in Virginia, the other church, there was a church member, a lovely lady, her name was Virginia. Now, those who had grown up with her called her Jenny. But it was very clear who does and doesn't use that name, and it would be interesting. You'd be in the session meeting, and there was one elder who would say, now, Jenny, and the other would say, well, now, Virginia. I wasn't complaining, but just, she would be addressed by both names in the session meeting. Gathering after church and visiting. If you knew me at one point, you could use the nickname. After this point, you use my full name. These can say things, and it even be not only the nicknames or the shorter versions of our names, the more familiar forms of our names, but also just the roles that we fulfill. You're known as the hard worker or the lazy one or any other one of those kinds of names. Names matter. This Sunday, we return to this on-again, off-again series that started in May of looking at the Ten Commandments. We're doing it a little differently. I've never done it this way, and where I'm pairing them will not always be a next-door neighbor commandment either, but looking at some that have a similar principle, going through those, there'll be 5. And again, we'll have some breaks during the summer. But then looking at those same principles in the first century church. In both cases, see how it relates to us. And we began several weeks ago looking at the first 2. You shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not make an idol. Not create a god in a different image. The point, I think the central point of those 2 is, who is your North Star? What is your true north? And then if God is your true north, then how do we respond? Initially to God. And it's about honoring His name and then honoring His day. And so looking at those two, and if you're thinking about, when He comes to talk about the Sabbath, what's going to be addressed, spoiler alert, I don't think it's what you think it's going to be. But anyway, that's what we're looking at today. Honoring the name. Honoring the name of God. What we do with names matter. Some years ago, the country singer Dierks Bentley had a song called My Last Name. And this is the verse, the chorus. A verse and a chorus. Daddy always told me, far back as I can recall, son, you're part of something. You represent us all. So keep it as you got it, as solid as it came. It's my last name. Passed down from generations too far back to trace, I can see all my relations when I look into my face. You never make it famous, but I'll never bring it shame. It's my last name. And you may have heard sayings along that it's the thing that you got, it's your last name, it's your honor. What we do with that. I think of ways that we honor the Lord's name when we use it well. And I think of the ways that we dishonor it, use it in a way that should not be used. We should not use it lightly. Later, Jesus will talk about oaths. And not saying necessarily it's you should not, it's not bad to swear an oath, but know what you're saying. And don't try to use qualifying terms. One would say, by the gold in the temple do I swear. Therefore, I have not sworn by the temple. Therefore, I have an out, a wiggle room. In the end, you're still dishonoring the temple, the worship place of the Lord. To be careful how we use it, to what we attribute. God, one pastor, in terms of foul language, he said that does not offend me as much as maybe in a hospital setting. If somebody attributes something to God that really isn't so, about God visited you with that injury, or something like that. He felt that was a dishonoring way of the Lord's name. At times in our conversation, and then sometimes I'll be careful and say the Lord and not God, just to do a little distance there, because it's something to be respected, and to be very careful in our language that we're making light of our relationship with the Lord. Now again, the God of the universe desires intimate personal fellowship with you. And so there is that sense of familiarity. The Lord seeks that fellowship. But to always be respectful and reverential towards it. What we honor. And how we honor the time the Lord has given us. Time is a gift. How do we use it? Now, in terms of honoring the Sabbath, I remember what I saw, and as a small child, kind of what was open and what was closed, and what the stories I would hear from before. My mother spoke of a family friend who would not even look at the Sunday paper because there were advertisements in the Sunday paper. Ooh, that might get me to thinking about shopping. She could save it to Monday. I don't know what was custom here, but think of department stores that have the display windows, and really, especially, of course, malls have display windows also, but back in the day before the malls, a display window of a store was a big presentation. You could go down a shopping street, one after the other, and actually couples, families would do window shopping. At least I can look at it. I may never own that code. At least I can look at it. And you might go in and shop for that item or something else. And stores would actually pull down curtains so you could not see the displays on Sunday. Don't know if that was here, but that was that was common in the part, not my childhood, but those would talk about that. Now we've come a long way. I don't think even if we wanted to, we could ever go back to that sense of how it was set apart. And some of you argue that it almost went too far in the legal. I don't want to debate it. I'm just saying some thought it made it almost too legalistic. Again, we can never go back, but we can. Time matters, and how we use it matters. And for the things that are important, I mean, the NBA and the NHL playoffs are taking place. I won't blame you if you're watching. Spend some hours, you value it. Especially during the shutdown, more than one person binge watched a favorite show on Netflix or Amazon Prime. And even today, it's like, a Saturday afternoon, I just watched 3 episodes kind of thing of my favorite show. It brings pleasure. I'm not going to knock it. We value it. We make the effort to spend the time with it. The things that matter. Making time, honoring the Lord. You don't know what the rest of your Sunday is going to look like, but you're taking the time now. And a challenge, you can challenge all of us to take that time during the week. A small block of devotion, a devotional time. Setting aside to spend time with the one that matters the most. But it's not just about, yes, taking time, worshiping the Lord. It's taking consideration for everybody. Because if you look at the commandment, it's not just, hey, take time. But your animals, those that work for you, the stranger in your midst, the time that's needed. Because we need time to relax and to rejuvenate. And quite frankly, and I'm one of the chief breakers here, so I'm not holding one stone, is even the things that we do that we think are recreation are exhausting and don't really spend the time of rest. Pondering these 2 commandments, it was interesting. I was working out and Pastor Nerd listened to a sermon, a presentation while working out on the iPod, the AirPod, on the phone. But anyway, listening, and his pastor shared the story of his own life. One evening, his wife was talking to him, and he could not respond. It wasn't a case of, I'm ignoring you, honey. It's like, no, I cannot respond to you. No, I'm looking, I cannot respond. And whatever she was talking about, I don't know if she was correcting him or what, but whatever it was, it quickly went to concern, and she got her to the hospital. Her first thought is it's stroke. Now they checked him out, eventually was able to speak, and said, you're healthy as a horse. But he thought, this is not normal. I've got to have this checked out. So going to see after regular, not the emergency room doctor, but original doctor, primary doctor. And the doctor said, well, you're depressed. He said, well, how can I be depressed? I'm excited about life. I get up, I run 4 miles every day, and I hit the gym after that and lift weights. I love what I do in my church. And, up in the morning, I'm preparing. In fact, I lead a study with the top leaders in the church. That really excites me. And imagine putting as much effort, if not more, into that as he would a sermon. And the doctor's saying, and so what time do you go to bed? Oh, between 10 and 10:30. And what time do you get up? Oh, between 4:30 and 5. You're not resting. That is why your body is depressed. Life's good. Be grateful for that. But the need for rest to rejuvenate. He was not giving a Sabbath to rest. He was shutting down his ability at times